start with this meta talk. This is off like the very recent patch. I'm gonna sort of break this down into two videos, so it's not too long. The first one will be talking about Brawl. The second one will be talking about Double Bubble. So we're gonna focus first of all. I'll say like why it took me a bit of time to release this. I could have released this like literally the day the patch went out, give my thoughts and whatnot, but I don't really want to give stuff that isn't accurate or things I haven't seen that make sense. I like seeing things first and experimenting things, seeing what different things and different people are running in different regions, and then sort of going from there. So let's start like the basic thing is what are people running, right? Well, in different regions, people are running different things. So if we look at NA right now, NA is pretty much all Brawl. NA loves Brawl. NA loves going first, right? They're pretty much running Brawl. Some teams are maybe trying Double Bubble, but it's a little skill cap, and people have to like learn how to play it. EU is also pretty much running all Brawl, right? And then KR, right? The slow region, this region that like in my opinion develops the meta and whatnot. They are playing Brawl, plus they're playing Double Bubble. And I'll talk about later why Double Bubble's good, where it's good, sort of how it's run. That'll probably be in the second video, but I'll make sure to do that. This video is mainly gonna be talking about Brawl and sort of like what type of Brawl is run, what are the heroes run, what maps do you play Brawl, when do you run it, and stuff like that. So let's already just jump into Brawl. Okay. So, Brawl. Whoops. The first question is like what type of Brawl, right? There's different versions. So I'm gonna break it down into like the tanks, right? And then we'll look at DPS and then we'll sort of go from there. So in general, obviously your Brawl is gonna have Reinhardt, right? Now there's different tank variations, what that mean different things. So you could have Ryan Orisa, you could have Ryan Diva, and you could have Ryan Zarya, right? Sigma is not really played right now because in general people are playing pretty fast. People end up playing slower than maybe Sigma will be played, but in general when people are playing Brawl, they're playing pretty fast. They're not playing slow. Hence Sigma's not getting played. So when are you running like Orisa? So when you're running Ryan Orisa, right? So when you're running Ryan Orisa, it's really enclosed spaces. So for instance, you're thinking like Control Center, right? Legion Control Center, you're thinking like Nepal Village and Forcing Point, right? Essentially where you're able to sort of have both Ryan and Orisa stacked together and you can push together. Why? It's because in all honesty, this comp is really weak into angles. So if an enemy team starts surrounding you, starts poking you from different areas, right, you're gonna struggle because you can't really do anything about it. With Diva, you can sort of like pressure one of the angles out. With Zarya, you can get like high charge and then maybe just push, right? Even Zarya sort of sucks at angles, but you can't really do anything versus that. So when someone plays slow and someone plays angles and stuff, Ryan Orisa can't do much. So it's weak versus angles, right? And it's really weak in like open space. So in an enclosed area where Ryan and Orisa are like really close together, for example, Legion Control Center in like the White Room, if you push in there, your Ryan and Orisa is going to get maximum value. And in a very basic sense, I'll explain you very basically sort of how it's run, right? And how it's run essentially is you walk up with Ryan's shield, right? And then you sort of when you want to speed boost, you halt, and then you push into that halt. Your Ryan swings into it. Your Orisa puts a shield for your Ryan and the rest of your team to use, so you guys can use the shield. When your Ryan's low, your Ryan backs up a little bit. Your Orisa goes in front, fortifies, then your Ryan can sort of swing through the fortify. Okay, so the other reason why this is like really strong is because of halt, right? Like halt makes it like super strong. And when you're playing against an open map or playing against another Brawl team, right? The thing that Diva has that's really strong is called his DM. Right, which makes like Diva very strong. The other reason why Diva is incredibly strong is because you verticality, right? You can peel plus and you can peel your back line, you can enable your front line, right? Diva allows you to do a lot of different things. But in all honesty, Diva is really there's a skill cap in it. Like it's a skill thing where like you have to be very good at understanding how to use Diva, and your team has to understand the tempo, right? Because if you just sort of like run into like an enemy, Orisa Ryan, they're probably just gonna win because they have a bulky tank line. They're not gonna take that much damage. They'll just live, and your Diva will probably just explode. So you sort of need to understand how to like understand when to push, understand when to kite, understand when to wait and bait CDs, like bait gold, bait Zarya bubbles, and stuff like that. Diva also needs to understand how to like off angle and get value out of off angles while still like enabling Reinhardt, but being a nuisance. but D.Va is incredibly strong, and I think most top teams, like Contenders Plus, will be mainly playing D.Va. Right? There might be some maps you're playing Zarya or Ryan, but like in general, you're gonna be playing D.Va. Whereas lower teams, right, who aren't able to sort of get that tempo and bait CDs correctly and whatnot, will play Zarya because Zarya is really strong, right? You get Zarya high charge, Zarya just rolls, right? So especially if you got a good Zarya player as well, you might just play to your strengths and play Zarya instead, right? So it sort of depends, on the skill, what skill you're at, what your team's comfortable with, and stuff like that. And also keep in mind, right? Like Zarya, like suck. Like when there's verticality. Wow, man, I can't draw. When there's verticality, right? Zarya sort of sucks, right? It's like really rough for Zarya because Zarya can't control high ground and whatnot. Okay, so we talked about verticality, peel, enable. We also talked. You can also like the very big thing I really like about this is like DM pushing, and in like Brawl Mirror, like a lot of things can be eaten by DM, whereas the bubble just could get bursted. So this is sort of the tank line, right? So again, Rhino and Orisa are really enclosed areas, right, where you're forced to fight instantly. D.Va, again, really good. Most top teams will be playing it, but you have to understand the tempo. Zarya, lower teams will probably be playing because it's easier to play, but it's not necessarily better. But if you can get value with it, it's going to be 100% better. So now we'll look at DPS. Well, let's use this color. So DPS, right? There's a lot of different DPS, and we'll sort of break it down like Mei, McCree, Reaper. Yes, Reaper's still here. We'll talk about why it's not really a nerf in all essence. And then we got the weird ones, and I'm putting these here because different teams like to run different things. You might have some like god tier, I don't know, Sim Hanzo player, Doom player that you want to try and incorporate, and like sure, try and play around, people who you're strong with, Hanzo, Torb, and then maybe like Sombra, right? But in general, like what we're gonna see is we're sort of gonna see. Let me first actually talk about why Reaper's still decent before I even get into here. Okay, so why is Reaper decent? Well, Reaper's still decent, and because, in my opinion, it's not a nerf, it's more of a buff, because of the fact that the distance got changed, right? Because the distance got changed, Reaper can now shoot more effectively at a bit more range, right? And, you can do more to squishies as well, but the biggest concept is the fact that because you're further away, you don't take melee damage, and you can, like, play corners more, you can play more with your tanks a bit behind, right? So you take less poke and melee damage, which means, guess what? Your rage is forced less. And because your rage is forced less, you can stay in fights longer, hence you can do more damage, right? So, the distance factor. Distance factor, right? Which sort of leads to like, rate not getting forced. So then the question, right, is always other ones. So Mei is really good on choke base, and we'll talk about it a bit more. McCree is like in general all in all good, right? He got buffed earlier. He's 225 HPs. Like he can take poke and still live and like be really oppressive. And in general, stun, right clicks are really annoying. Doom is like a niche pick that if you really want to like engage with Doom and maybe go like Doom Reaper and like play like a really high tempo brawl and try and just run the enemy team over before they do anything, sure, you could try and do that. Ash, maybe longer base maps. You want to keep your Ash a bit further away and try and brawl with Ash, play an Ash LOS. Sim, maybe like, you're playing on something like Lijiang, Night Market, right? You're telling to point and you want to like run Sim because, you can put turrets on point and then charge Sim and get a lot of value to Sim. Hanzo, maybe the same concept. You want to play more distance and so you've got your Hanzo so you can play a bit slower and look for like, picks off the, Hanzo. Torb, maybe you're running Mei Torb and the enemy team has like constantly running, Sombra Tracer and you want your Torb turret to deny the flankers. And you're a god tier Torb player, so like why not run Torb? Torb is sort of like a McCree and Reaper together. With McCree, why? Because he can like shoot from far away if you hit the shots. Reaper because he can like walk forward and start shotgunning people. And then Sombra, it's a bit of a niche one, but like maybe you want to play really slow and you want to like try and play to hack and get hacks and push forward and brawl with that, or like build EMP. Really niche, and I don't think I'll really see much playtime, but maybe not, maybe it will. Okay, so like in general, I want to summarize the ones that I think, in my opinion, are like the mainstream, which is sort of this. The Mei plus Reaper or McCree. And like, I'll put Doom here because I've seen some teams run Doom, but I don't think Doom is that great because he can really be easily like just tracked and killed. So like this essentially plays really for chokes, right? You're looking for a choke and you're sort of looking to wall on the choke and push off that. Right, and that's why McCree and Reaper are both good because they can push off like you 3-2-1. I'm walling, you wall, your team pushes forward. Maybe you wall the Reinhardt, and you kill the Reinhardt, right? So you play for chokes and you look to try and get value. Whereas the other comp that I think is actually really really good is Reaper plus McCree. And this comp is really strong because it's more for open space, right? And it looks to like you essentially have a lot of damage, and this is really good for chokes and like really good against maybe like enemy brawl teams. But Mei isn't really good versus double bubble. Why? Because Mei can't really do as much to like Winston. I mean, you can maybe freeze Winston, but Winston's got a Zarya bubble when he goes in. Whereas if you got Reaper McCree into a Winston, you're probably gonna shred that Winston bubble, like the Zarya bubble, instantly, and maybe blow up the Winston before he does anything. Right? So like Reaper Cree is a bit more versatile, where your Reaper can like pressure the Winston, your Cree can pressure maybe the enemy Echo or whatever they have, and you're able to like do more and you can poke more. And essentially, if you're playing like Reaper Cree into like Mei Reaper, right, your Reaper Cree might look to like play a bit slower, bait wall, and then push in really aggressively, or maybe you'll look to like go really aggro, and Reaper will like go on the Mei and force cryo instantly. Then people push forward, so because the Mei can't wall. If you're playing Mei, right, then you may be looking for a wall really fast and just pushing off the wall before the Reaper Cree even gets value, and just using chokes, right? So both of them have their pros and cons. I think it depends on team's playstyle and what they're comfortable with, right? And we'll talk about maps in a second. And the last thing, right, that I think is really important is sort of the backline, right? Like some people might think, okay, cool, we're running Brawl, right? Let's bring back like Moira, and because we want to go really fast, or we want to run BAP. And Moira, obviously, yes, you can go really fast, right? And you can maybe build Cole, and you may push off that. But my fight will always be for BAP, because BAP has Lamp, right? BAP has range damage. BAP also has was I gonna say? Oh, has verticality, right? So like all of this allows BAP to do a lot, right? Obviously, if you're playing against some heavy spam and like BAP isn't enough, then sure you can go Moira, and like it'll keep your team healed more, and you can try and push into the enemy team. But in general, I think BAP is really strong. And yeah, and the way to think about it is like BAP, you've got Lamp, you can keep going, right? I think the ult's really good, and Moira is really good if you want to play super fast and try and get value instantly, or the enemy team has like a lot of spam and like BAP isn't like healing enough fast enough. Okay. So that's sort of hopefully explained to you all like the roles and whatnot. Let's go into a type of brawl. Oh, well, no, not type of brawl. Sorry, why brawl? So why am I trying to say that brawl is the best? Why am I saying that this is good? Why wasn't it played before, and all that type of stuff. So the first thing I'm just going to briefly talk about is the fact of like this sort of brawl is good now because you can basically live ball engages. Even before, when I used to have a team play brawl, essentially what would happen is a ball would slam, right? And the brawl team would maybe lamp, maybe stun the ball, and maybe use BAP shift and maybe even like amp heals, but they'd probably amp speed. They'd take the hit, right, and then maybe they'd amp speed after, so the speed didn't get cut by the slam. But essentially what happened, right, is they'd live the ball engage. And because they would live the ball engage, right, they'd be able to push forward and keep going, and then maybe look to punish the enemy, like, the ball Zarya comps, like, engage or backline. So because Brawl is able to sort of live a ball's engage, the enemy ball engage, that allows Brawl to get a lot of value because they can push into the backline and kill them. And like I said, it sort of happens from like, McCree stun, Lamp, and the other concept that I think everyone's getting used to now is the concept of like pressuring, pressuring the ball before he comes in. I'm not going to go too much into like, positioning and how to do that, but like a lot of people just have straight up better awareness now and understanding like where the ball is and who to mark and whatnot. And some teams might still run Brawl because it's like if you have a really good ball player and he's super strong, you'll probably still get value at a ball. But the same thing we said, if the enemy team is really good at Brawl, they could maybe beat it as well. And then sort of the other thing why D.Va is so strong, right, into ball comp, because you can essentially you can hold like angles, right? You can pressure threats. So for example, maybe there's an Ashe like farming you, right? Your D.Va can go soft push that Ashe, like just fly in DM and then just like fly out. So your D.Va is able to like deny like angles, because how Brawl loses is Brawl pushes forward and like the enemy team is sort of shooting you from all different angles, right? So what can happen now is like this D.Va will maybe pressure out this, the Lucio will maybe pressure out like a Tracer flanking, the Kree will maybe like help the team or maybe like deal with something else too. So you'll sort of have like parts of your Brawl team pressuring out other threats, which will make it hard for the enemy team to do anything. And on top of that, if your D.Va doesn't have to pressure anything, well, your D.Va can enable your front line and take space. right? They can still peel your backline if there's like a ball going in on something, right? Ball slams, your diva can just DM the ball engage, like all the damage that it tries to do to kill something. And then on top of that, right? You also realize that you have a Reaper, right? And Reaper's decent outrange now, and Reaper's also part of the comp. So if you're running Kree Reaper, ball comes in, you stun the Reaper, right? A Reaper onto the ball does a shit ton of damage. So yeah. Okay. So now, sort of, that's why Brawl is getting played, and I'm not gonna go too much into it, but Brawl versus Double Bubble is a very interesting concept, and I'd say that it's sort of a skill-based thing where Brawl can definitely beat Double Bubble, and that's why not many teams in NA and EU are like running Double Bubble because people are just playing Brawl and just beating Double Bubble. But like at a really high level, in my opinion, Double Bubble can definitely beat Brawl. It's just how patient and good you are at Double Bubble, and I'll like talk about that in a second video. Okay, so let's talk about like when do you run Brawl? Let's use a different color. Let's use purple. Oops. When do you run Brawl? Okay, so when do you run Brawl? In a very, very simple sense, right? On Brawl maps, right? I know that's sort of crazy to say, but it's very simple, like where it's enclosed, where it's an enclosed map, right? It's short, so you can get on the enemy team fast. And then very good and very emphasis on this when you've got good chokes. Okay. So enclosed, like I said, an example is sort of, King's Row is a really good enclosed map. A good example of like King's Row is also a good short map. You can think also of like, I even say some Koth maps, right? Like sort of subcategorized like under this, right? Where you've got like Lijiang Control Center, Lijiang Gardens. You can even say Lijiang Night Market's also pretty good. You could say Nepal Village. You could argue Nepal Shrine. It's a bit more debated because it's a bit more open. But there's just so many maps, right, and Koth that are like enclosed or short that you'll be able to run Brawl in and get value. Now, the one thing I want to talk about, and I think it's really important that people understand, is this concept of good chokes, right? So when I coached Third Impact, we sort of, and like was one of the coaches for Third Impact, I'll say, we were a very big spawn holding team. We would spawn hold a shit ton. Why? Because we would essentially abuse chokes. We would spawn hold Havana. We would spawn hold Junkertown. We would spawn hold Dorado. Right? Like literally like most maps, right? We would try and spawn hold them because they had good chokes that we could actually abuse, right? And we would use Mei, right? Because Mei is good for chokes. And we'd essentially just, even though the comp is not good there, because no one thinks about playing Brawl in Junkertown, right? But on defense, if you hold spawn, right, and you're looking for Mei walls, it's actually really strong. Why? Because if you win the first fight, right, you can sort of like kill time off the clock. You're building ultimates. You're going to get another fight for sure later on the first point, and you'll have an ult advantage as well, right? So you end up killing a lot of time, making it really hard for the enemy team. So in general, we're going to see a lot of like, teams running, Brawl, right? Like I'll even add Rialto. Like you can spawn camp on Rialto as well, right? So we're going to start seeing maybe some Brawl and defense, which will force teams that maybe want to play double bubble right on attack to like, double bubble spam for that matter, to like switch into Brawl and just maybe mirror it. So just remember chokes, right? Like sure, the map may be long, right? The map may be, like high ground and whatnot, but if the team really wants to play good chokes and just wants to spawn camp, right, then all the factors behind don't matter as much. It's just the fact that they're abusing the choke. And then understanding, okay, this choke, we lost this fight, what's the next choke we can use? So where it's generally bad, right, is obviously, like verticality, so like vertical maps. So for instance, I'd say like Watchpoint. But again, I'm going to mention that Watchpoint you can also spawn camp, but Watchpoint generally bad, right? Not that great. Wherever there's like a lot of like it's really long, there's like a lot of rotations. For example, like Route 66, like imagine second point. That's pretty rough attacking into second point. It's really open, right? And there's a lot of high grounds the enemy team can use. I'd also say and argue Temple of Anubis, depending on how good the defensive team is, because there's a lot of high grounds as well. So high grounds, length, right, and sort of like kill boxes, right? And like does the enemy team have multiple rotation and kill boxes? And I'll talk about that in a second video and sort of how Double Bubble abuses them, but kill boxes. And again, I'll sort of like, I'll sort of summarize in this, right? Because that's sort of like the end of this, and I'll summarize in this, right? Like I'm not gonna go into like how to play Brawl really right now. Like check out future videos. You can sub and whatnot, like and whatever you. Hopefully you enjoy the content. And I'll definitely go more into Brawl because Brawl is something that like I'm very fond of, because I was, third impact, obviously spawn camping owl teams and such as it goes. But what I'd say is, you have to understand that Brawl, right, is going to be a lot easier for teams to run than Double Bubble, right? It's going to be so much easier because the teams that run Double Bubble are going to have to be so smooth with their cooldown usage, so smooth with their positioning, so smooth with like that first fight. And if they mess up that first fight, right, it's going to be really hard, right? And essentially what'll happen is a Brawl team will just steamroll. So we might see a lot of, like, again, NAEU just gonna sort of like just run a lot of Brawl, and they'll get really good at it. So where the fact that they might be able to beat some Korean teams in Double Bubble, even though Korean teams are really good at Double Bubble because they're just got like the highest level of Brawl, right? But at the end of the day, right, in my opinion, Double Bubble is gonna be better on some of those maps because Double Bubble also has a really good ult cycle, which again I'll talk about in the second VOD. But Brawl, right, really strong in closed maps, right, short maps, abuse chokes, understand the difference between the DPS, and yeah.